Hi, everybody. Pastor Paul here from TikTok, TikTok pastor, social media pastor, and glad to share my Bible talk with you today. And the title of our Bible talk today is Should I Go to Church? It's a question I get asked often, and I'm going to give you my answer to the question today. Should I go to church? Many of you ask that as we're in deconstruction time these days of our beliefs, many are. And I get asked that a lot. So I'm going to kind of give you a biblical basis of how I see the church today and what I believe is the answer to the question, should I go to church? And I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm here doing a Bible talk before we get completely started. And I forgot I'm supposed to be doing this on TikTok Live. So I'm also going to be doing that as we go. But why do I do a Bible talk? Well, let me give you, and I had a graphic made by Jan Scales that does great work for me to volunteer and help bring what I do to you. And so let me show that to you if you're on YouTube and check that out. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing here, guys. Let me get my technical snafus in line. Because doing a Bible talk is part of what I do to bring spiritual life to people in unconventional ways. A lot of us have lost our communities of faith but are still hungry for worship time, for Bible teaching, for community. And we're looking for ways through the work of Pastor Paul to bring those to people in a way that's in the 21st century mode. And so you can see the graphic if you're watching on YouTube. Here's 4 ways we bring that experience of faith community to people through the work of, through my work as Pastor Paul. And on Wednesday mornings, we do a spiritual mindfulness moment. And that is just a time of mindfulness, connecting, worship, prayer for one another. And so you can join that. That's Wednesday morning, 7 a.m. Pacific. I release a podcast, which are our conversations about deconstructing going on Thursdays. You can hear that on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. On Sundays, we have a Sunday community that comes together live on Zoom. You can find out all the information about all this stuff in my bio with the link tree. And then Saturday mornings, I release a Bible talk. I've had people say, well, I do sort of miss Bible teaching and that I had in church. And I want to be able to hear kind of what's going on in the world from a biblical perspective. And so we fill that with releasing a Bible talk every Saturday. So that's what I'm doing here. And now you know other ways you can be able to connect with us here as we go. So my topic of my Bible talk today is entitled, Should I Go to Church? Many people ask me, I'm deconstructing my faith. I can't stand all the right-wing mantra teaching, the echo chamber stuff I hear in my church. I don't think I can bear to be with my faith community anymore. But I still feel guilty if I don't go to church. So there's a passage from the book of Hebrews 10:25, that many use to guilt people into going to church. And it says, let's not neglect to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. And I've heard time and time and time again, leaders of churches say, we're not to neglect the gathering of ourselves together. Right? I'm going to talk more about this down the line, but one thing to know right off the top, when that verse was written in the first century, that said, do not neglect the gathering of yourselves together, it was written at a time when it was illegal for Christians to meet in a building. That verse is not about going to a building on Sunday morning or Saturday night for some. It is about getting together with people of faith. It says, don't neglect getting together. I think it's actually saying, don't live on your own. You guys need each other. But nothing about that is saying go to a building or else God is going to be angry at you. And I'm wearing my God is not mad at you t-shirt today, and he certainly as hell is not mad at you for not attending a church building on a Sunday morning. So let's make that very clear. And then we've seen COVID come and shelter in place, and churches were told, hey, you're going to kill people if you get together. Don't do it. And pastors lost their freaking minds. And so in case you didn't know, I was the senior pastor, senior leader, we called it, of a church that I helped plant. And I was the leader for 10 years. And I would attend pastoral meetings regularly. And the pastors would say things like this. The pastors that got together, they would say, we need to figure out how to get the church people out of the church building and out into the world to help support people in the world. And so here comes COVID. And the state does it for us. It says you can't meet in a building anymore. And those comfy, I start to say fat cows, like it says in Isaiah, those comfortable people in that building that don't want to get out of the building are ejected from the building. Maybe God had something to do with that. I don't know. But the people are out of the building. And what does the I want to say something else. What does the church do? It starts to squeal and scream, we want to get back in the building. And I hear these leaders saying, you're telling us we can't worship God, as if God can only be worshiped when you're in a building with some worship guy in skinny jeans and a ripped t-shirt playing the pads on the, with the Holy Spirit pads in the background. The assumption that worship happens in a building on a Sunday morning, or that we can only worship God when certain music that we call worship music is playing. As a lead pastor, I hated that we called that music worship music, because the intimation there is you can only worship when this music is playing, and Christians believe it. As if God can't meet you in your bedroom, your house, your living room, your shower. I mean, it's ludicrous. And I always hated that idea that we called it Sunday morning worship and we played worship music, because worshiping God is not about hearing music and raising your hands or to your belt if you're Baptist, or not raising it at all if you're Presbyterian. Worshiping is about acknowledging that you're connected to something bigger than yourself. So it's just been absolutely ironic to me to hear the church screaming how they're oppressed because they so damn want to be oppressed, when they've been asking, how do we get the people out of the church forever? And I'm like, the governor of California has done it for us. Why don't we start to celebrate that? So Hebrews 10 was written in a time when it was illegal for Christians to meet in a building, and the church flourished when they weren't allowed to meet in buildings. You don't have to meet in buildings. In fact, I'm giving away a little bit of what my answer to the question is, should I go to a church? I think the church, when it starts meeting in buildings in America these days, bad things happen. But anyway, I don't want to totally give away my inline of should I go to church or not. So let me start to define what is a church. What is church? And sometimes in the church world, we used to say big C church is like the church universal. It's all the churches combined together as one. And the little C church is that group that meets in a building or a home or whatever. The word that we translate as church in the Bible is the word ecclesia, which is kind of a cool word. I like to say it because it makes people think I know Greek. Ecclesia, it means an assembly of people, a gathering together. And in fact, the ecclesia of Greek heritage, and it's a Greek word that the New Testament was written into, it actually meant like a calling together of the governing people of a community. It was a governmental body in Greece, and that was ecclesia, and that was a term that the Christian church took on to say our assembly together is the ecclesia. It's the church that Jesus said he was going to build. The Bible describes the church in many different ways, including in a building, but not exclusively in a building. In Hebrews 2:12, Jesus is quoted as saying that he will sing praise in the midst of the assembly, that the church is an invisible thing that we can all be a part of. It is the universal gathering of our souls together in our belief system of honoring the life of this rabbi who was written about in the first century. And you can argue whether he was divine or not divine, or raised from the dead or didn't raise from the dead. I'm not going to get into that argument. I gather people around the idea that there's wisdom and amazing stuff in his story, and some of the other stuff is corrupted. But the church universal is all of us who kind of gather around that story and that goodness. So the church isn't just a building according to the Bible, it is universal. It's invisible, and it's the invisible conglomeration of all of us who are sort of gathered around the idea of the story and the life modeled by Jesus. Now, the church is also visible. In Romans 16:5, it talks about that church that's in a house over there. And 1 Corinthians 16:19, the house of Prisca and Aquila, in their house they were meeting, and it was a church. They didn't have to be in the temple. They didn't have to be in a building. In the second chapter of Acts, the original church met in the temple every day and met in homes. They did both. They were in the building out there and meeting in homes. Now, the church can also be a region. In Acts chapter 9, it says the church throughout all Judea and Samaria. The church can also be a city. In the book of Corinthians and in Revelation, we see the church of Laodicea or the church of Corinth. All the collection of all the house churches in a city was considered the church of the city. So the church can be a city, it can be a region. And in fact, the Bible even describes the entire world. It's going to be tough for some of my evangelical friends, but the entire world, and it's your boy Paul saying it too, that the entire world is the church. In Ephesians 5:25, it says, Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And who did Christ give his life up for? Well, John 3:16, and others say that God so loved the world that he sent his one and only son. So the church in the Bible is described as a group of people that meet in homes, that meet in buildings. It's a city, it's a region, and it's the world. So the Bible describes church in a whole lot of different ways, not just a group of people meeting in a building. And even the church has defined itself through the years, not as meeting in a building, but as something more. In the Lutheran Statement of Faith from 1530, it says, the church is the congregation of saints in which the gospel is rightly taught and the sacraments rightly administered. So he's saying a church is any place where people get together with the idea of talking about the gospel and taking part in the sacraments. So the gospel is the message of Jesus. The gospel literally means good news. How often do you feel like the message of the American church these days is good news? Somewhere good news went out the door, and we started to believe the gospel was something else. But don't get me started and off on that. But so a church was any place people got together to gather around the message of the life modeled by Jesus in the Gospels, and also administered the sacraments. The sacraments are communion, or the Lord's Supper, the Sunday community that we have gathering online every Sunday. We take communion together because we just think it's important, not necessarily, the Lord's Supper as it's been practiced in the evangelical church, but communion as a divine combining of our spirits together and combining that corporate spirit with the spirit of heaven. That's why we take communion every Sunday. And that's one of the sacraments, and baptism is the other sacrament. And so a church is where a group of people get together, they talk about the amazing story of Jesus, they share communion together. And if someone wants to signify a decision to make a life connected to the story of Jesus and the goodness of heaven, they can be baptized through this group. And that's all that a church is. It's never defined in the Bible or in church history until recent American Western history as that building where people go and the guy has an electric guitar and skinny jeans, and there's lighting sort of like I have behind me with a smoke machine and the pads playing, so we think that we're hearing the music of heaven. A church can be in a house, it can be in a coffee shop, it can be in a bar, it can be anywhere you are. And the Bible says, where any two are gathered, the Spirit of God will be there with them. So it doesn't take even three to be a church. Now, I'm a believer that we're not to walk out our faith alone. I think we are just communal animals. And so I do encourage you to find a community of faith, but don't be guilted into believing that the church that Jesus came to create is that group of people that meet in buildings on Sunday morning with crosses on top and pithy sayings on their marquees. Don't let people guilt you into coming back to that. And in fact, in the Bible, we see where the church of Galatia, that the Apostle Paul is writing to them, and they've been taught you don't have to live under the religious system you used to live under. But now others have come and started to teach them, like, yeah, you don't have to live under the system you used to live under, but you do have to be circumcised. You do have to take a few of the old rules and apply those. And Paul writes a letter to them, and I can see him, he's writing it in like all capital letters. And he says, who vexed you? Who vexed you? Who hypnotized you to make you go back to some old stupid thing that you didn't have to do in the first place? So before I go deeper into what I'm teaching from the Bible here today, let me answer the question. Should I go to church if I'm deconstructing? My answer to that question always, when I get it now, is I don't recommend anybody to go to a church that meets in a building in America 4 times a month. Vince, I see that comment on TikTok, and I hate to break away from my YouTube teaching here, but my friend is saying something to me about being defrocked for becoming LGBTQ affirming. Vince, please send me a DM. Let's connect. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm sad to say here today that whenever anybody asks me, how do I find a good church? I say, don't go back to a building. Don't let anybody vex you to going back to the old way of doing things. Does that mean I think all evangelical churches are bad and all evangelical pastors are bad? No, I think that's the equal opposite negative reaction to something that's been taken offline a little bit. And we have to be careful not to do that swing. I hear people all the time, well, every pastor's out for money and they're out trying to control their people. And I tell you, I know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pastors. I've worked with pastors for 25 years now, and I know very few that make a lot of money. And I know very few that aren't working from the absolute best of the passion of their heart. They're just in a system that's off. And the reason I recommend people not to go to a building 4 Sundays or 4 Saturday nights a month is because I just think there is a mindset, a principality, the Bible calls it, over the church now that draws us to something we don't want to be. It's so prevalent and has been given place for so long in our American churches, we don't even recognize it anymore. So when people say, should I go back? I say, don't let them vex you with Hebrews 10:25. Jesus never demanded anybody go to a building to be a part of the family of God. I tell you this, I think God wants us to be the church, big C, universal, of the 21st century, not of the first century or any other century in between. I think something new is happening. I think that's why we see all these deconstructing people on TikTok, because something, I just want to cuss so much, something crazy new is happening. In Isaiah 43, God says, I am doing something new. It's springing up in the desert. Can you not perceive it? And I think he's saying to the American church today, I want to do something new. And I've been wanting to do something new for a generation now, but the boomers have said no to me so many times. The Spirit of heaven is saying, I offered something amazing to happen in this generation, and this generation has said no. So I've given them over to their right wing belief system, and their entire hope is now in somebody like Donald Trump. That generation is going to have to go, and something new is coming in the next. And I'm sorry, boomers, I don't mean to curse a generation, but I'm telling you, I believe this generation said no to God so many times, and yes to right-wing politics so many times, that now God is like, okay, well, let's just wait and do something in the next generation. And people, so when people ask me, I'm like, no, let's be the 21st century church, not the 19th century church or the 13th century church. Let's do something new. Why are there so many deconstructing pastors on TikTok? Because something new is in the air. Why is it getting so crazy in our culture? Because something new is in the air. And I think we're in a season where you have to choose, am I in the new or am I in the old? Am I going forward into something new, or am I being vexed into something old? And I think something amazing is happening in the 21st century. So let me tell you how Jesus saw this, and I'm going to hit back in the Bible and finish this up here in a little bit. I want to invite you to something first. I do coaching, and in this world of deconstruction, a lot of people are kind of like asking questions. Do I go to church? What do I do now? And we're offering a coaching deal. Gosh, and I can't find it on my screen now, so I'll just tell you about it. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Sorry, TikTokers and YouTubers. Oh, here it is. Let me open that up. Yeah, there it is. And I'll share it on YouTube. I can't share it on TikTok. I'm sorry, guys. We're going to do a webinar next Friday. It's called "Am I Happy? Am I Supposed to Be Happy?" And it's one of the questions of the season is, if my belief system is coming out from under me, where do I stand in my life? And sometimes that takes a really strong identity check of ourselves. And this is what I do. I do coaching cohorts on an ongoing basis through the year, and I love it. It's by far the best pastoring I've ever done. And so we have a new webinar coming up that you can get a taste of what a coaching cohort looks like with Pastor Paul, and learn just how important our identity is, how important is knowing our story to us being healthy and living life to the full, as the Gospels tell us is the life that's available to us. So next Friday, August 27th at 5:30, we'll be doing it. I want you to join. Information is in my bio or on my website at pastor-paul.com. Maybe you've been thinking, you read a lot of self-help books, and then the book goes on the shelf and goes away and nothing changes. You may need a coach to help coach you through that. I do it. And I wish I could play some of the testimonials I get from people, because it's absolutely incredible. Gosh, I want to play one, but it's so long and I don't want to take the time. But I just had a friend who was in my last cohort sent me a video, and I'm just so amazed. He just said, it changed my life. He made a decision actually to leave ministry and go and start to learn coding because of what we did in working with his identity in coaching. And so maybe you've never thought about a coach. Maybe you've been thinking about coaching and having a coach. Come join my cohort discussion next Friday. Am I happy? Am I supposed to be happy? And we'll look at how identity crafts a story of what we're doing. And for those of you who are in a time of deconstructing your beliefs, it will deconstruct your self-view as well. And so I want to invite you to join me for that. Info at my website, pastor-paul.com. All right. Now let me get to finishing this up a little bit. People ask me, should I go back to church, or how do I find a good church? And my answer these days, and I feel badly about it because I love the church and I devoted my life to it for a quarter of a century at least. But my answer today is don't go be in a building 4 Sundays a month, because it will draw you to something that you don't want to be a part of. What does that look like? Let me show you a little bit, and you'll hear it on TikTok, guys. Let me show you a little bit of what I see in the American church today that I don't want anybody to get drawn or vexed to be a part of.
Deny the existence of Jesus Christ as the irrefutable one and only God, you're an idiot.
Sadly, able to hear that on this TikTok, is the face of American Christianity today.
So if you're an idiot, what I'd encourage you to do is get out a sledgehammer and smash yourself in the crotch.
A religion that claims its leader says, love your neighbor as yourself, is now having its adherents encourage non-believers to inflict self-pain.
If somebody's kneeling during the national anthem, they're probably an idiot.
But you see, this guy doesn't care. His politics are so intertwined with his belief system, protecting his tribal narrative is way more important than people.
If someone's hiding behind, plexiglass, they got 2 masks on, they're probably an idiot.
Unfortunately, many other Christians believe and act like this man. They run people from the church with the shame we heap on them.
So please help me purge the land of the idiots.
God wants to tell this man and all right-wing Christians, do you do well to think this way? In fact, they're not Christian at all. None of this sounds like the Christ I read about in the Bible.
If somebody wants to increase your taxes ever, they're an idiot. If someone believes in the Green New Deal, they are an idiot.
And you evangelicals that are silent about things like this and not calling it out, you're of that mindset as well. Do you do well to act this way?
You're an idiot.
Yeah. That's what the American church looks like today. When Jesus was on earth, he talked about the church in very, very negative ways. He said, you're putting bondage of law on people, and I don't want you to do it anymore. And the disciples, they were walking by the temple one day, and they said, Jesus, isn't this temple amazing? Isn't it the most wonderful thing you've ever seen? And Jesus said, you know what? Not one stone of that thing's going to stand on another. It's going to all be gone. And you know what he didn't say when he told that? He didn't say, pray that it doesn't happen. He said, this generation has lost it and they've missed it, and something new is going to have to come, and this is going to have to pass away. And we see that when we look at the book of Hebrews chapter 10. So let me go to Hebrews chapter 10 and we'll finish up with this. So Hebrews chapter 10 starts like this, and you can read this all through the book of Hebrews. The point of the book of Hebrews is, guys, the old way of doing religion never worked. It was never God's plan. You've got to go look for the new. And I believe the same thing is being said in this generation. My plan was never to have church be in a building. And in fact, in Matthew chapter 7, we have the story of Jesus standing and saying to his disciples, I will build my church, and it's going to be powerful, and it's going to be world changing. And the evil of that sin of putting bondage of law of people is not going to be able to stand against it. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to change the world, and it's going to reconnect people to God. And when you have a church that's not connecting people to God out of God's goodness and grace, but instead is putting law on people, that if you are for President Obama or President Biden, you're not a Christian. If you kneel for the national anthem, you're not a Christian. If you vote for a Democrat, you're not a Christian. That is an apostate church. That is heresy, my friends. It is adding things to it. It is what Paul would say, who vexed you to believe that you have to be violently anti-abortion to be a Christian, or violently anti-gay marriage to be a Christian, or homophobic to be a Christian? Who vexed you to believe this? And because those are the drawing principalities and mindsets of our church in America today, I have to recommend, no, you can't be a part of that. And in Hebrews 10, it says this, for since the law has but a shadow of the good things to come instead of the true form of these realities, it can never, by the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year, make perfect those who draw near. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered, since worshipers, having once been clean, would no longer have any consciousness of sins. Hebrews 10, I'm sorry, I'm yelling. I'm getting all excited. Sorry, guys. Hebrews 10, though, says, that was never God's intention. to have you do those sacrifices. That was a man-made way of trying to draw close to God. And yes, some may say, and it was a type of Jesus and all those things, and we could argue about it. But I think the book of Hebrews is saying that's not what God's plan was. That's not the plan of heaven. That's not how heaven comes to earth, not by sacrifices of animals and not by laws and not by politics in church buildings. And so I started a church with every intention of being a church that wasn't in a building, but was in a city, a region, and the world, as the Bible says. And I said, we're not going to have church programs like every other church has had through all the time that I've been alive. We're going to get together on Sunday morning and stir one another toward good deeds. And we're going to go out and do good deeds, and we're going to come back, and we're going to have the testimony, just like it says in Hebrews 10. And now I've lost my place. It says, let us stir one another. Now I can't even find it. Let us consider how we stir one another toward good deeds. Sorry, I have totally lost my place in my notes. But it says what the church is supposed to do is consider how we stir one another toward works and good deeds. That the church isn't a place where we get and are exclusive in how we control people and who is us and who is not us. It's a place where we get together and say, how do we inspire one another? That word stir actually means irritate. How do we irritate one another like a piece of sand irritates an oyster to get a pearl? How do we irritate one another to do good deeds? And that's what the church is supposed to be. Let us consider how I finally found it. Verse 24. Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some. You don't meet together so you're in a building fulfilling, checking a box. I went to church this week. You get together to stir one another towards love and good deeds. That's what the church is supposed to do. And I don't see the Church of America doing that anymore. We're stirring each other toward political stuff. And we've given ourselves as a generation over to something that I think is abhorrent to God and aberrant to what the church is supposed to be. So no, I do not recommend you go. You find a place that stirs you to love and good works. And I think we need to add the sacraments in it. That's why we offer a Sunday morning thing. That's why I offer the Bible talk here. That's why I offer a Wednesday morning mindfulness time together. And you can find out all those things on my website, because I do think there is a space to do faith as community, but it is not happening inside the building. I tell you guys, I started a church. I said, we're going to change the world. We're not going to have programs. And everybody sat in that building with me 4 Sundays a month and said, yeah. We're completely on board. Pastor Paul, you're awesome. You're amazing. You and your wife are going to change the world, and we're going to change it with you. So when do we have the women's group? And I'm like, no, guys, we're not going to have programs. We're going to stir one another towards love and good works. Yeah, we're on board. We love that. Let's go change the city. Now, when do we have the men's breakfast where we accuse each other of watching too much pornography? When do we have the kids' purity services so we can tell them that if they think about sex, they're going to hell? It all becomes the same stuff because the mindset is so powerful. The principality has been in place in our churches for so long. We believe that is what God is calling us to. And I'm saying Hebrews 10 and all these other things are saying, guys, do not go back to that old religion. If you're deconstructing, leave that church. And it breaks my heart to say it because I love church, but don't leave the faith. Don't leave God. Find the new community that is stirring one another towards love and good works. And I know a lot of people who are saying, I'm going to leave that old church behind and I'm going to find the church of the 21st century and do that. Jesus said that he would build his church. So you find a place to do the sacraments together. Maybe it's your own home study group that you have. You just find a place, but be connected somehow into the larger church, whether it's online with me or somebody else. Just find a way to be connected so you're not on your own. But then for some who say, but I miss that bigger community. Let me tell you something. The best community I have in my life for a long, long time has been this Tuesday night group that meets in a bar. Some of the people who meet there are atheists. Some are Baptist. Some are Presbyterian. Some are Mennonite. And we get together and we talk about life. We call it Tuesday Tavern Theology. And it's the best church community I've ever had, because none of it is based on, do we agree on the rules together? And the American church just cannot get over this idea that to be Christian means that you're anti-gay, anti-abortion, you're known for the things you're against and the laws you want to pass and the taxes that you hate and the Republicans that you support and the Trump that you are unwaveringly behind. And I'm telling you, it's not the church of Jesus Christ. It's the church of America. It's the church of nationalism and racism. It's not the church that Jesus said he would come to build, and the gates of hell could not prevail against it. That those people that are bringing law and trying to put bondage on you, those are not the guys that are the church. When we get into a building, we start to build our church. And boomers, my God, you guys want the church to meet your needs, meet your needs, meet your needs. You don't give a shit if it drives every young person from the church and everybody in the millennial and Gen Z generation from our buildings because you want to be comfortable. I've seen it in my own church. One day, I walked out into the parking lot of my church, and one of our prominent families had driven a pickup truck of theirs to the service. And it was parked in the spot, and I walked out and I saw the tailgate of the pickup. And it had Donald Trump stickers all over it, and Second Amendment stickers all over it, and America, love it or leave it bumper stickers all over it. And then down in the corner of the bumper, there was a bumper sticker that said Huckfillery. Do you get the juxtaposition of the two first letters of the two words, Huckfillery? This is when Hillary Clinton was running for president against Donald Trump. And I stopped and I saw that, and then my eyes trailed down to the bumper. And you know what was on the bumper? The old Christian fish symbol. And I couldn't help but think, here is a Christian that's a prominent Christian that's been a Christian for a long time. And somehow they think that Huckfillery bumper sticker and that Christian fish go together, that they are the same thing. And I asked myself, how can somebody sit and listen to me preach 4 Sundays a month and think that that is okay? And I found out that more of the people in my church body believe that way than I ever could have imagined. And there's nothing I could do to talk them out of it. Because the principality of the Church of America is that's who we are. I wanted to build a different church, not the one that Franklin Graham is in or Lindsey Graham or any other Graham. A different church that actually tried to stir one another to love and good deeds through the message of this amazing rabbi who was written about in the first century and said, no, you don't change the world by having guns and fighting against it or doing drone strikes against terrorists. You change the world by serving and dying for it. You change the world by having a selfless life that is dedicated to the common good of humanity, because God loves all flesh. He wants to pour out his Spirit on all flesh. By the way, when I say he for God, that's my tradition. The Bible actually says God is neither male nor female, and you can see God however God presents as safe to you. But the God I know is the God saying, let's get this Spirit out on everybody. That's what the story of the cross is all about. No more bondage of rules and law. No more bondage of politics and right-wing thought. No more bondage of right-wing media. No more bondage of bad theology teaching that's based more on Paul's writings than on the life of Jesus. The new church is going to say, who was this rabbi that we hear about today? How did that story get preserved? And what does it mean to us that he said, be willing to die for people and serve selflessly? And that's how the world gets changed. I want to be a part of that church, Big C, worldwide. In Hebrews 11, it says the people weren't looking for God to build something for them in this life, but they were looking for a city whose builder was from heaven. And the American church is looking for a Messiah to come and take over America for them, just as the first century church was looking for a Messiah that would take over Israel and make Israel great again for them. And even on his last day on earth, Jesus' people were like, today, Jesus, now? Do you take control of the world today? Do you make us kings and princes today? Do you make Israel great again today? And he's just like, holy crap. How has my teaching been this bad? He reacted exactly as when I saw the Huck Fillery bumper sticker. How did you get that out of everything I taught? Jesus said, if the fig tree doesn't bear fruit, it gets cut off at the roots and thrown in the fire. I love so many people who are involved in American churches today, passionately. I listen to that Mars Hill, the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast, and I cry my eyes out because I dedicated my life to being a part of the evangelical church, to see it make a positive impact in our country and in my region and in my city. And it's not making a positive impact. It's making a negative impact. When my wife ran for mayor and wanted to see our city changed, the people that stood against what we saw that needed to be done were the Christian people in our community, not just the Christian people, but to our shocking and disbelief, it was the right-wing Christians that said, no, we can't do anything that might help people that doesn't look Republican. We can't do anything that might help the gays be more acceptable in the community. And we were stunned that these were our Christians, brothers and sisters. And I know they're doing it out of the passion of their heart for God, but so did Saul. Excuse me. Saul of Tarsus thought he was doing what he was doing when he was killing Christians out of the passion of his heart. And Jesus had to say, Saul, stop persecuting me. And I think Jesus is saying to the Western church today, particularly the Church of America, guys, stop persecuting me. I'll finish with this. I told the story of Jonah in a video this week on TikTok. And we know the story of Jonah as him being thrown overboard and this big fish bringing him back. But do you know why he went the opposite direction of Nineveh? We all kind of know the story because he didn't want Nineveh to be saved. But do you know why? Because he hated the Ninevites. He hated them because they were enemies of his people. They were a different race. They were a different religion. They were a different nationality. And he thought his race, religion, and nationality needed to be preeminent in the world. And these Ninevites were rising up and they were threatening Israel. In fact, they may have even killed some of Jonah's family members. And he thought he had a right to hate them. And God said, go teach them. And they repented. But what we find out in the story is Jonah was like, I didn't want to come here because I knew, God, you were going to have mercy on these people. And I don't want you to have mercy on people that I don't like. And he tells God this amazing thing. He says, kill me, God, because I would rather be dead than live in a world where you have mercy on those people of that race, nationality, religion that's not mine. And I challenge people all the time, read the book of Jonah and think of yourself as Jonah. Would you say, God, if you're going to have mercy on those people, those BLM people, those Muslim people, those people that I don't like, just kill. I'd rather not live in a world where they have mercy from you, God. Because my side is right and their side is wrong. My side is good, their side is bad. And God said to Jonah, in that story, and I love it. I think every Christian should have to read Jonah chapter 4. Jonah wasn't mad that Nineveh repented. Jonah was mad that he knew God had mercy for those people. And he said, God, would you please blow them up? Just like James and John said, we're going to call down fire on this village that rejected you, Jesus. And Jesus rebuked them and said, I didn't come to destroy people. I came to reconcile them to heaven. And he's pleading with the American church, or has been pleading for a generation. I didn't come to destroy people and otherize them and marginalize them. I couldn't have been more clear that that is the opposite of the story of the gospel of heaven. And the American church is like, nah, we would rather just hire more cops and have a larger military budget to make sure we keep those people under control. And we don't want to live, God, in a world where you would have mercy on those people. And God said, do you do well, Jonah? You don't know the mindset, James and John, you're of right now. You're partnered with something not from heaven. So why do I not recommend people go to a church in a building in America today? Because they don't know the mindset thereof. They're not partnered with a mindset from heaven. They're partnered with a man-made mindset. And I'm saying to people who vexed you, trust me, I did everything I could for 25 plus years of my life to see it changed. And it just doesn't seem like it's going to change in this generation. So find a place where you will be stirred toward love and good works, and join that faith community. For those of you on YouTube, you can see we have a Sunday community that meets on Sunday morning. For those watching on TikTok, you can go to my bio and it has the links in there. Challenge yourself. Do I believe that I'm one who loves the Ninevites, or am I Jonah saying I'd rather be dead than live in a world where you have mercy on those people, God? And it breaks my heart to say it. So I speak blessing over you and joy. I know many of you have lost community. And I bless you to find a community of faith. Just because human beings have ruined the church doesn't mean God messed up. You keep pursuing your spirituality. You keep pursuing your wellness and mental health. You keep pursuing your right identity in alignment with the goodness of heaven. And God will show you the cool stuff that can happen in this new season that's springing up in the desert. Can we not perceive it? So join us Sunday morning for our Sunday community. I didn't do this Bible talk as a commercial for our Sunday community. You find it wherever you find it. And for some of you, you're still going to your church community and it serves you well, and I bless that. My words are never fully universal. There's always nuance in these things. But just make sure if you're seeing your church pulled toward that mindset, you say, I will not be a part of that spirit whereof. For those of you on YouTube, yeah, they put up my Venmo and Patreon. If you would subscribe to my Patreon page, that's how I earn a living as well as coaching. Don't forget that I have a webinar to give you an experience of my coaching cohort coming up next Friday. All of that info in my bio or on my website at pastor-paul.com. So bless us, heaven, with your goodness and stir us toward love and good works. From the story of this amazing first century rabbi that showed us truly how to live life abundant. Amen. We'll see you guys soon.